you already are the oldest president in history. I recall yet that President Kennedy had to go for days on end with very little sleep during the Cuba Missile Crisis. Is there any doubt in your mind that you would be able to function in such circumstances?
Not at all, Mr. Truitt, and I want you to know that also I will not make age an issue of this campaign. I am not going to exploit for political purposes my opponent's youth and inexperience.
Today on Political Ed, we're diving into the humor and wit of the funniest president of the United States, Ronald Reagan. A man whose jokes not only charmed the nation, but also softened the rough edges of politics. Now, before the age of television, it's difficult to gauge how funny earlier presidents were. However, it's relatively safe to say that no president has ever been as consistently funny and charming as our 40th president, Ronald Reagan, who served 2 terms from 1981 to 1989. He was known for his quick wit and disarming humor, and Reagan used his comedic talents to engage both allies and opponents alike.
Now, I know that a lot of you have been having some fun with my advancing years. You even tied my recent surgery to my age. Well, I got to be honest with you. I had that same operation when I was young, and it felt so good I wanted to have it done again before I was too old.
Reagan's humor was never mean-spirited. Instead, he used it to poke fun at himself or his political opponents, mainly Democrats, without ever crossing the line into nastiness. Remarkably, even Democrats often found themselves laughing at Reagan's jokes.
It's a story about a woman who walked into a bridal shop one day and told the sales clerk that she was looking for a wedding gown for her 4th wedding. Well, the saleswoman asked, "Just exactly what type of dress are you looking for?" "A long, flowing white dress with a veil," she responded with assurance. Not totally convinced, but afraid to offend the woman, the saleslady said, "You know, dresses of that nature are usually more appropriate for brides who are being married for the first time, for those a bit more innocent, if you know what I mean." Well, the lady retorted and put her hand on her hip. "I do know what you mean, and I can assure you I'm as innocent as the rest of them. Despite all my marriages, I remain as innocent as any first-time bride. Well, you see, my first husband was a dear, sweet man. It was a terrible tragedy, actually. All the excitement of the wedding was simply too much for him, and he died as we checked into the hotel on our wedding night." "I'm sorry to hear that," said the clerk, "but what about the others?" "Well, my second husband and I got into a terrible fight in the limousine on the way to our wedding reception. We haven't spoken since and got the marriage quickly annulled." "What about your third husband?" asked the store clerk. "Well," the woman replied, "he was a Democrat." "And every night for 4 years, he just sat on the edge of the bed and told me how good it was going to be."
Reagan's jokes were carefully crafted to be sharp, yet lighthearted. Although he could tell a joke simply to humor his audience, he also had the unique ability to tell a joke that drove home a point. And he had a knack for using humor to address serious issues, like the Cold War, in a way that made them more understandable without diminishing their importance.
One example is a story they tell. You know, you have to wait 10 years there for delivery after you order an automobile. And so a fella had finally gotten the money together and was going to buy an automobile. Only about 1 out of 7 families have them in that country. And he went through all the paperwork and everything and finally signed the last paper, laid down his money, and then the man behind the counter said, "Come back in 10 years and get your automobile." And the man said, "Morning or afternoon?" And wait. The fellow behind the counter says, "Well, what difference does it make 10 years from now?" And he said, "Well, a plumber's coming in the morning."
Reagan often began his press conferences and speeches with a joke, setting a lighthearted tone. This approach not only took the edge off an otherwise hostile press, but also made his serious messages more impactful.
Did you hear the story about the kid
who was outside the Democratic fundraiser selling kittens. When the people came out from the fundraiser, he was holding up the kittens and he was saying, "Buy a Democrat kitten." Well, a couple of weeks later, the Republicans held a fundraiser in the same place. And when they came out, there was the same kid with the kittens. And he said, "Buy a Republican kitten." And one of the members of the press who'd seen him there 2 weeks before said, "Wait a minute, kid. You were selling these kittens the last time as Democrat kittens. How come the Republican kittens now?" Kid says, "Because now they got their eyes open."
The media, usually a tough crowd, often couldn't help but laugh along. Reagan's ability to joke about himself and the world around him made him a beloved figure, even among journalists who often didn't agree with his policies. Reagan's humorous remarks during press conferences were not only entertaining, but also effective in breaking the ice and making the press more receptive to his messages. His lighthearted approach to serious topics made him a master of communication. Reagan's humor wasn't confined to American politics, it extended to the international stage as well. During his presidency, Reagan used humor to ease tensions and build rapport with Soviet leaders during the Cold War.
I try to follow the humor of the Russian people. We don't hear much about the Russian people. We hear about the Russian leaders. But you can learn a lot because they do have a sense of humor, and you can learn from the jokes they're telling. And one of the most recent jokes I found kind of, well, personally interesting. Maybe you might tell you something about their country. The joke they tell is that an American and a Russian were arguing about the differences between our two countries. And the American said, "Look, in my country, I can walk into the Oval Office, I can hit the desk with my fist and say, 'President Reagan, I don't like the way you're governing the United States.'" And the Russian said, "I can do that." The American said, "What?" He says, "I can walk into the Kremlin, into Brezhnev's office, I can pound Brezhnev's desk, and I can say, 'Mr. President, I don't like the way Ronald Reagan is governing the United States.'"
Reagan's jokes about the inefficiencies of the Soviet system were not only humorous, but also highlighted real issues in a way that even Soviet officials could acknowledge. His ability to laugh at the absurdities of both systems created a more relaxed atmosphere during tense negotiations. At the Reykjavik summit in 1986, Reagan's humor helped build a personal rapport with Mikhail Gorbachev. Although the summit didn't result in an immediate agreement, the groundwork was laid for future negotiations on arms reduction, showing how Reagan's humor was a strategic tool in diplomacy. Ronald Reagan's humor wasn't just a domestic asset, it was an international one as well. His jokes broke down barriers, built bridges, and left a lasting legacy of good-natured diplomacy. So here's Ronald Reagan, the funniest president the United States has ever had, whose humor transcended borders and ideologies. Well, that's going to do it for this video. Thanks for watching Political Ed. Drop a like on this video if you enjoyed it, and let us know your thoughts down below in the comments. If you haven't yet subscribed, please be sure to do so and check out our other videos.